Those of you who were here last week know that I spent a lot of time on the poems of Kabir, who was a 15th century Muslim poet in India, who was also revered by the Hindus, very interfaith in that sense. And then I mentioned at the end that I would say, well, once we have the purification and the enlightenment, where does it go? What do we do with it? So we'll discuss that. But I thought I'd begin by giving a little recap by reading two poems I didn't read last week, which illustrate, the energy of, the purification and the enlightenment, if you will. And what's striking is that they use the same image, as you'll see. It's kind of like choosing between fire and fire in your life, or water and water. Either way you're going to drown, either way you're going to get burned, but in a good sense or not. So this is it's the image of the hurricane. So this is Kabir. This I've discovered is true knowledge. Those who scramble to get into a boat sink like a stone midstream. So if you're clinging to something, supposedly to save you, you're going to sink anyway. While the shelterless and abandoned reach the other shore. So if you're pure poverty of spirit, you reach the other shore. Paragate, reaching the other shore, that Zen, that Mahayana notion. Those who dare to take the hard, winding, thorny road get to the town in the end. Narrow the way that leads to life, right? Those who stroll the easy highway get robbed or even killed soon after they set out. Everyone's wound in illusion's web. The so-called holy, just as much as a trap as anything else, the so-called holy as much as the worldly. And those who run for safety under the comforting dais of form and ritual and dogma. We'll come back to that later. Well, life's hurricane lashes them. Stay out in the open. You'll be left safe and dry. The more exposed you are, the better off you are. The ones that love never savages live in boredom and pain. So, if you're never gobbled up by love, you're going to be bored. So choose. Those love devourers, like a cannibal, live in bliss forever. The ones who lose their own eyes come to see the whole creation blazing in their own light. So you have to go blind in order to see. Whereas most people who see are blind, Those who hold on to their own sight remain blind as bats in full moon. When I began to awaken to the truth, I saw how bizarre and crazy the world really is. So here's the hurricane that actually gives life. Love's hurricane has come. The whirlwind of knowledge has arrived. My thatched roof of delusion has been flung in the four directions. My hut of illusion, so carefully crafted, has come careening down. Its two posts of duality have crashed to the ground. Its rafters of desire have been split by lightning. Thunderbolts have collapsed all its eaves of greed. Its big stone jars of evil habits has smashed in a million pieces. After the wild storm, torrents of divine love drenched me, body and soul. Then, O Kabir, the sun soared out, the sun of glory, the sun of realization, and darkness dissolved forever. So it's a hurricane, that gives us life. And we spoke a little bit about this notion of love being the one that slays last week. That it's not a strong, such a common notion in Buddhism. It's more with the theistic traditions. But I was saying last week that what you're dealing with here is consciousness, attention, surrender, openness, non-duality, connection, consciousness. All of that sounds like love to me. In addition to the kindness, loving kindness, and compassion that are often spoken of. But then, thanks be to God for the page-a-day calendar, just after the day after was Valentine's Day, just after, and that's why they probably put it in there, just on Valentine's Day last week. This is from the Sutta Nipata. So in other words, the original Pali canon of scripture, so that you can't get more Buddhist than this, and this is what it says. Let your love flow outward through the universe, to its height, its depth, its broad extent, the length and breadth and height and depth that Paul speaks about. A limitless love, without hatred or enmity. And 2 days before, speaking about this life and death, to die in order to die. This is Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki. Our life and death are the same thing. You've got to die in order to live, etc. When we realize this fact, we have no fear of death anymore. Sounds pretty good, huh? Nor actual difficulty in our life. Because if we're going around dying anyways, then really living, then no difficulty. So that's a real freedom. That's a real freedom. So where do we go from when we have this, when we've experienced this? And this is this reminds me of the great, wonderful koan 41 from the Blue Cliff Record with my favorite master Joshu. And he asks another master, when you've died the great death, the real mystical death, in other words, when you've died the great death, how do you come back? And the master says, don't come in the dark. Come in the daytime. So, in other words, don't cling to the darkness. Don't cling to that mystical, but come back in the daytime. Come back to, we would say, real life. Come back to the marketplace, as we'll see shortly. And even Bernadette Roberts uses that language too. So I'd like to focus on two aspects of that. If you're coming back in the daytime, it means you're not clinging to the paraphernalia of enlightenment and of ritual and of the holy things, as we just heard. Remember, as the koan says, the temple is a blade of grass. Or as Tokusan realized after his enlightenment, he brought all his commentaries on the Diamond Sutra out in the yard and burned them up. It's part of what is meant by the 16th koan in the Mamonkan too, where Yunmen says, "The world is vast and wide. So why are you putting on your priest's robe at the sound of the bell?" It has other meanings too, but so we can't cling to those things, as people like Thomas Keating and Cynthia Bourgeois have said. The rituals, in any tradition, when you've reached a certain awareness, are both more important and less important. They're more eloquent, they're richer. You see what they really are all about. But because you see what they really are all about, you don't need them as much as a scaffolding. So that's interesting. So I'll read a couple of his poems about those particular aspects. Without devotion to the beloved, all your practices are illusion. Do them zealously, pursue them passionately, they're still in vain, you ignorant dolt. Your penances are vain, your austerities are vain, what you consider your vast knowledge is vain. And so without the Lord's name are your meditations and contemplations. Your rites, your rituals are vain. Your adorations are vain. All your do's and don'ts are vain. They just plunge you deeper into the sea of delusion and will never help you reach the shores of bliss and peace. And this is more evident. People hunger for sense pleasures and rush to satisfy the palates of their minds. Teach them truth, and all they'll do is raise doubt after doubt and revel in useless quarrels. Look at the history of Christian theology. Look at the history of Buddhist debate. You can get all wrapped up in just useless quarrels. Kabir, the slave, is lost in love of his beloved. All delusion gone. I've given up vain games, which it can so easily become. Wake up, you idiot! Shake off your long sleep. Focus within. Discover the rare wish-fulfilling jewel. Right? The jewel is there. I've given a whole teisho on the wish-fulfilling jewel, that image that comes up all the time. It's reality itself. It's that shining reality itself, which is everything. You've slept on and on, lost countless days to sloth. Get up right now. So the plundering thieves leave empty-handed from your house. This is the sign, friend, that you're awake. Vedas, Puranas, scriptures appear to you like poison. Kabir says, I'll never sleep again. I found God's priceless jewel within my own body. Within. So then you go back in the daytime. And so what is that actually going to mean? It's going to mean, well, I'm going to refer to another famous Indian poet, more contemporary, Nobel Prize winner, actually, Rabindranath Tagore, a little book which Matt gave me. This is what he says about coming back in the daytime. Leave this chanting and singing and telling of beads. Whom do you worship in this lonely, dark corner of a temple with the doors all shut? Open your eyes. See, your God is not before you. He is there where the tiller is tilling the hard ground, and where the pathmaker is breaking stones. He's with them in sun and in shower, and his garment is covered with dust. Put off your holy mantle, and even like him, come down on the dusty soil. Deliverance? Where is this deliverance to be found? Our Master himself has joyfully taken upon him the bonds of creation. He is bound with us all forever. That sounds very Christian, right? And taking upon the bonds of creation. Come out of thy meditations and leave aside your flowers and incense. What harm is there if your clothes become tattered and stained? Meet him and stand by him in toil and in the sweat of your brow. Coming right into the grit of daily life, like Jesus did, putting spittle on people's eyes to heal them, etc. So this is where reality is, and of course, it should remind us of the 10th ox herding picture, when after you've reached no self, you enter the market with open hands. That's the ultimate stage. But listen to the description. It sounds almost exactly like what we just heard from Tagore, with the clothes all dusty and tattered. So this is the enlightened one coming back into the daytime, into the village. With bare chest and feet, he enters the market. So perfectly open, perfectly free, perfectly exposed, nothing hidden. His face is smeared with earth. His head covered with ashes. A huge laugh streams over his cheeks. Without humbling himself to perform miracles or wonders or any of that holy stuff, he suddenly makes the withered trees bloom. So it brings new life wherever he appears, just radiating. The page a day calendar. This was just yesterday from Annie Dillard. We live in all we seek. The hidden shows up in too plain sight. It lives captive on the face of the obvious. The people, events, and things of the day, to which we as sophisticated children have long since become oblivious. What a hideout! Holiness lies spread and born over the surface of time and stuff, like color. Holiness is the color of things. That's beautiful. So it's right there. And of course, what Zen always says, wash your bowl, it's the flower, it's the oak tree, it's the hemp of your shirt, it's just ordinary stuff. That's coming back in the daytime to perceive it all right then and there. So you're coming back to ordinary life, and it's just looking at the master coming into the marketplace. It just seems like an ordinary I, an ordinary self, but yes and no, right? Ordinary, yeah, but not ordinary, right? So I want to conclude with actually going back to where I was a few weeks ago with the River of Light. This is a Kabbalistic insight addressing this very point that I first heard from the very famous Kabbalistic rabbi Rami Shapiro, who's written many wonderful books. And I was with him on an interfaith trip once to the Far East, and I remember he pointed this out. And then I found it again. I guess it's a kind of a basic, it's a truism, I think, in the Kabbalah, to describe. Well, I'll show you. As usual, it's a mystical thing based on. So this, of course, it's read from left to right. This is ayin, which means nothingness in Hebrew. In other words, the ultimate name for God that I've pointed out many times. Nothing. Very Buddhist, in that sense, very real. So it's just the three letters, ayin. Now, if you put it, let's see, do we have this right? Yeah. So this inverts the letters. So the second one becomes the third one, and the third one becomes the second one. You see that difference? So ayin and ani. Ayin and ani. Ani means I, the first person pronoun. So with just a little adjustment, in reality, the I becomes nothing, and nothing becomes I. So when you discover your true reality, you become nothing, but then you come back in the daytime and become I again, but not quite the same, right? But just a little adjustment, the tiniest of adjustment. That's called yod, like the Greek iota, when Jesus says not the slightest letter or the slightest part of a letter. And that's what we're talking about. So here's what, at the end of the book, what Lawrence Kushner says about it. Is this not the great mystery of religious consciousness? That the one who began as the fool, I, the self, has ascended through the heights of heaven to become nothing, through all the rungs of consciousness and divinity, but then back to this ordinary person, the ordinary person, who feels somehow blessed to simply awaken each morning. Indeed, I hope. What loftier goal could there be for any therapy? And remember, we compared therapy and mysticism throughout the book here. What greater goal could there be for mysticism, for spirituality? I don't know why he includes this parenthesis. All we can do, warned Freud, is transform your hysterical misery into common unhappiness. Well, if that's the goal of Freudian therapy, then just forget it, because we're capable of a whole lot more than that. Constant bliss, that's what we're capable of, all right? The I that's set out is different from the very same I that has returned. What seems to be a perfect circle, upon a change of vantage, is revealed to have been a spiral. That's almost like Ken Wilber. So it's not just like you're back to where you started. It's a spiral. You're way further along, even though you come back to just being an ordinary I. But the ordinary I is exactly the point. Because the ordinary I is extraordinary and is the whole of reality. As long as you come back in the daytime, you'll see that.